By now, I had done an internet search for Pen and Sword and found out that they weren't a small, local, cosy publisher at all. They were huge, international, with a footprint in many of the places in the book, such as Germany, Europe, and the USA. Maybe I wouldn't have dared send in my manuscript if I'd researched them first. Even so, the Society of Authors have a legal team that is very good at checking over authors' contracts and making the changes that set the contract in the creator's favour. There were plenty of things on my contract that I didn't thoroughly understand and which benefited from the Society of Authors' diligent work. I find it's really worth being a member. Once we'd finalised the contract, I was told to source 20 illustrations and gain copyright permission for each one of them. My first port of call was my father. He sent me several black and white photographs, some slides, leaflets, and posters he had made in the RAF, and a few of me and my brothers as children. I didn't know he had those. I already had maps of Gorodomlya Island, situated between St. Petersburg and Moscow. I'd gathered quite a few maps in my efforts to get the geography of the narrative right. But it was hard to source copyright on such old illustrations and photographs, old but not old enough to be out of the copyright period, which is the creator's lifetime plus 70 years after their death. Finding out who the creator was and contacting those still alive for permission to use images became a full-time job. I had to pay for copyright on some images. I decided to source 30 images, as some just weren't going to come through with permission. If I had 30 possibles, 20 would be the final number. I've ended up with 20 good images, all credited, covering personal, technical, and geographical aspects of the book. It would have been great to travel to Russia for some contemporary images of Gorodomlya Island on Lake Zalaga, which is apparently now a popular tourist destination. But with Russian troops still in Ukraine and our house actually being used to shelter Ukrainian refugees, a trip to Russia was out of the question. I'd have liked a visit to Leeds University Rocket Association, LURA, but it was closed throughout lockdown, and the two students most involved with my book left to pursue their careers. One artistic disagreement occurred over the extensive use of dialogue in my book, which was there because when my father was telling me something like, Eric thought I was a jumped-up know-all and he was determined to put me in my place, I could immediately visualise the sort of conversation the two men might have had across their differing ranks, both of them stubbornly intelligent, both in their 20s, but Eric with far more hard-won experience. My imagination was cinematic. I could see the scenes and hear the dialogue, and for a while a screenplay was the idea that chimed most closely with me as creator and with the visual variety of the material. I wrote the original work as a series of scenes, but Heather was adamant. She wanted far less dialogue, as this was not a fictional work. She sent me another Pen and Sword book as a model for mine. One with chapters, not scenes, with the tiniest bit of dialogue. At this point, I didn't think I could rewrite the whole book in what I saw as a less interesting and readable way. I fell out of love with the project and felt like withdrawing from the contract. Before I could do that, Heather took things into her own hands. She introduced me to Lynn Matthews, a freelance copy editor who was assigned to my book. I was told that Lynn would work with me on every detail of every page, paragraph, sentence, and word of the book. Lynn and I immediately hit it off professionally. I was very grateful for someone else's forensic eye on my text, as there were some days I simply didn't want to look at it. To my joy, Lynn was positive about the book. She understood that I was originally writing it cinematically. Lynn and I worked extremely well together, and quickly and efficiently there was a renewed manuscript, still with plenty of dialogue actually, but now in Pen and Sword's house style. Ideas about withdrawing from the contract receded. I was again happy with the publisher-author relationship and felt we were on the same side. We both wanted to publish a really good book. Pen and Sword's in-house creative team designed a striking book jacket from images I supplied of the actual rocket building facility on the island, as well as an original drawing of the R-14 rocket, which was designed by Gorodomlya. I wanted the jacket to feature the barbed wire and raven from authentic film footage of a remnant of the military fence on the island. But in the end, the raven had to fly away. There's just a wisp of barbed wire on the red and black cover, but it's the real deal. See my next video for how Pen and Sword support the marketing of the books they publish.